Welcome back to the Black Girl's Guide to the Pivot, and I'm elated. Y'all, I used a whole different word than excited. I'm elated for this guest. Okay, so let me tell you about her. Let me give you her professional credentials, and then I'm going to tell you the real deal about her. Okay, you ready? All right, so here we go. Patrice. That's her government name. That's what I know her by. She has a degree in a bachelor's of science in architecture, a master's degree in architecture. She is a current doctoral student. She's all the things. She's a college professor. She's a wife. She's a mom. She plays sports. She's very creative. Like let's see. The list goes on. She's creative. She does like she designs, organizes, in a partridge in a pear tree, y'all. Like she does everything. Like if I was to sit here and read the bio, you'd be like, so is that the whole show? Yeah. So please welcome my guest and probably my favorite one. Don't tell everybody else that though, okay? My favorite guest to the show, Patrice Craft.
Hey y'all.
Okay, so Patrice. So, but now I get to tell y'all how I know her. So let's backtrack a little bit. Okay, this is back when we weren't cool. Just kidding. She was always cool. I was not the cool one. So we went to high school together. I know that was like just 4 years ago. Just 4 years ago. We went to high school together just 4 years ago. We're like only like 26 years old.
Right.
When we knew each other back in the day, we both ran track. We went to Lancaster High School. I'm putting all the business out there. We were the first graduating class of 1999. Yes, I'm going to include you in that, Patrice. I'm not letting that go. And then you left me. No, just kidding, y'all. Y'all know life happens. And Patrice left and she moved on to beautiful and better things in the Houston area of Texas. Y'all, I'm so excited for this particular interview because as some of you know me in real life, like the last 2 years has been this journey of getting to know myself, figure things out in this stage of life and unlearning a lot of things. And so as I was processing what that looks like, what that means, more recently, me and Patrice reconnected. And one thing we had in common is that we're both unlearning a lot of things that we have previously learned due to parenting, cultural context, history, and all the extra things. And so when the more we were connecting on these bullet points, the more I was like, wait, this sounds like a podcast topic. And so when I put it out there, she willingly accepted the interview. So Patrice, thank you so much and welcome to the Black Girl's Guide to the Pivot.
No, thank you, Tavier. And thank you for the introduction. I'm really excited because I'm always giving Tavier her flowers. I told her the other day, I said, you have friends that you don't even know about because I'm always dropping her name and just putting her name in people's ears because of all the amazing things that she does as a wife, a mother, as a business owner, nonprofit owner. So it's just an opportunity to share that. But most of all, being able to sharpen one another. You know, it says iron sharpens iron. And so she has
Yes.
been that for me in this season. So I'm excited. I'm elated. That's one of my words, but I'm elated to be a part of this amazing opportunity, but also being able to speak specifically to our topic today.
Okay, so let's get started with this. So I'm not sure. Okay, so real funny story, real quick. I recently saw a reel of a woman who listens to audio memos that her friends leave, like their podcast. And I quickly sent this to Patrice because I'm like, that's exactly how I listen to our conversations because we audio memo each other. That's on the iPhone. And we're always going back, dropping gems. And like, I'd be in the car, like, yeah, that's a good one. And then I get all hyped up and then I have to send her back a memo. So that is literally how we communicate with each other, listening to
Yes,
our personal podcast episodes.
yes. And it's definitely like a therapy session most times because I'm like, sis, what do you think about this? I have questions, and it's
Right?
just right on time and always what I need to hear in that moment. So yes, it's good. It's so funny.
Right, because that's exactly how I feel. Sometimes it's a therapy because I'll be like, "What am I doing wrong? I am definitely looking at. I don't get it." So
Right.
yes. So
Love
when
it.
we talk about like this concept of unlearning what we thought we knew, or the things that we were taught and we knew, I know for me when I was like, I'm in my 40s, y'all. I'm in my 40s, and I'm loving it to be honest. But I find myself re-parenting myself and really redefining what adulthood looks like as well as what motherhood looks like. Is there anything that you can add to that concept, Patrice?
Yeah, so something that just came to mind. It's been a journey, and you don't know until you know. And so a lot of times, and this is what came to my mind as I was preparing for this, is like I entered into a battle that I didn't even know I was in. So, and what I mean by that is I'm fighting not just for myself and my daughter or my children who are the future, but I'm having to go back and fight for what our family lineage was then.
Mm,
Um, Not repair, but break some of those strongholds so that I myself don't allow it to carry into my relationship or my children's future or their lives. And so, I remember I had a personal trainer a few years ago, and she we were having this conversation and we were talking about health, and she kind of had to stop me, and it was convicting because she said, when you think about our history, especially as
mm-hmm,
Black people, we will do the same thing that our parents did because it's a learned behavior, something that we just grew up knowing. And she said, so think about it like this. Grandma has this pot. She has this small pot, and she has to cut her roast to fit it in
mm-hmm,
the pot, right?
mm-hmm,
And so guess what happens? Mom, she has a larger pot, but she still cuts the roast to fit into her pot. Here comes daughter. So we have grandma, we have mom, right? And then we have daughter.
yeah.
Here comes daughter. She got the fancy new age, like up, the new and up and coming fancy Instapot, whatever you want to call it. It's super huge. And she's sitting there looking like really dissecting, like, I have this roast. If I put the roast in here whole, it will fit. But I've always known because of history and what I've seen to cut the roast to put it in here. And so she said, just because it was done that way doesn't mean that because we now have the research sources, we have the knowledge, we have the information, we have the know how, we are healed, we don't have to do it that same way. And
Mm,
I'm telling you, that concept blew my mind because I
mm.
have that roasting pan and now I have a cool Instapot. And so it's like, wow, it's like now I have the ability through my healing to give my children something different that my mom or my grandmother did not either have access to, they were never taught, or they just didn't know. So that's where I'll start, but I hope that answered your question.
It does, and it brought up so many other thoughts for me. So we're parents, right? And I think Black people historically, the majority of us might have grown up in poverty, and so
Yeah.
when we do better financially, we equate that to let's buy our children all the things we didn't have and give them all the experiences we didn't have. But what we don't stop to do is to look at those things that we learned from the previous generation and question why are we doing that. And I think more recently I've had to say to myself, yes, I can give my children all the experiences and I can buy them all the things because I've worked really hard to move our family into a different financial situation. But what is the legacy I'm going to leave my children that my children will carry on to their next generation? And I think it's so important that we not only look at the financial aspects, the communities we're growing up in, and we're moving out of the hood essentially for a better life, but are we questioning why we're parenting the way that we are parenting? Like we question the financial aspect, like we're like, yeah, we're not doing that anymore. But are we looking at why we keep doing the same thing over and over again?
Exactly. Exactly. That's good. Yes. And that's that to that point, I think that along my journey, just like you said, like over the past couple of years, it's like when I turned 40, I was like, well, people kept telling me when you hit 40, it's like enlightenment, your enlightenment years. They didn't
Yeah,
tell me that the enlightenment was, oh, you about to figure yourself out for real, right? Our 20s, our 30s, we're just playing around a little bit, but 40s, it's a whole nother level because you're starting to balance out, right? And so
yeah.
what I realized is through that journey, as a mother trying to, my boys it wasn't not so much, but my daughter,
Mm,
my
mm.
daughter, it was like a mirror, a reflection of myself when I was younger. And I've had to, even yesterday, pause because I'm gonna just be real frank. She woke up with an attitude and she was like, "Get out of my room." I said, "How dare you?" I said, "If that was my mama, I would have been laid out on the floor." But
Right?
what I had to think about, which my mom never, and love my mother, but never probably ever considered, how is she feeling? What was she going through? And as Black people, we that's not our response. But the
Mm-hmm.
reason I thought about that is because I know my daughter, I know her heart, and so I understand that those emotions are not stemming, they're not personal. It ain't me because I know I just woke up, just walked in your room, didn't do anything to you. So what are you dealing with? And how can I
Mm-hmm.
help you through that? Long story short, she was having some issues with her girlfriends and, just, middle school stuff. And so it was like, well, mom, she's here, she's the target. Let me take it out on mom. We sat
Yes.
and had a conversation. Well, we didn't sit down, we were in the car because, you got to get them where they can't run off. So we were in the car and I was like, hey, let's talk. Let's talk, right? My mom used to do that to me, but it wasn't the most happy, safe, and secure way.
Right.
um, I took that situation, and said, okay, I know the car rides were effective. I want them to be positively influenced and effective for my daughter. So let's take a car ride. You want to go get some? Okay. Well, while we're doing this, I'm gonna take this opportunity to talk to you about what's going on, and then get information. Whereas with my parents, I never had that, or my mom, so to speak, because I had a stepdad at one point. But with my mother specifically, I never had that. And even now in adulthood, I yearn for the opportunity to just pick up the phone with my mom and have those conversations. And I can't
Yeah.
because she either doesn't know how to respond, or it will be a one-sided response based upon her negative experience or her experience versus really thinking about it. And not saying my mom is not wise, but using that, I always reflect back to scripture when it comes to emotions, my emotions. um and I learned recently I do that because we know God is emotional. He got angry. His son was flipping tables. Like, it was all kinds of stuff happening. He was weeping and crying and sweating blood. All kinds of stuff was going on. He grieved. He delights in us. And so there's all these emotions, but we have to keep them under control in order to really think through what we're experiencing. And so I'm a thought leader. I've learned that about myself through this process, and I'm trying to teach my daughter the same thing. Instead of reacting emotionally, let's think about this. And that's something that I never was offered as a child. It was like, sit down, shut up, be quiet, stop crying. I'm like, no, but I'm hurting.
Yep.
And the only way I know how to express that. And so that's one way, or one thing that has an example, I should say, that I have to just shed light on that.
Thank you so much for sharing that and being transparent. I love me some transparency. And, what resonated in what you shared was I have a daughter too. And that's when I really started to look at things critically, as
Yes.
opposed to just going through the motions or doing what we normally do. My daughter, she's at an age where she's starting to have big feelings, big emotions. And I'm like, do
Yes.
I respond the way my mother responded to me, which was probably how her mother responded to her? Or do I hold my gut response in and allow her to have her own identity and express herself, and allowing her the opportunity to know that this is a safe space within
Yeah.
reason. You don't get to lose your mind, okay? You don't get to lose your mind on me, but I will lovingly take in those responses, and then we're going to process it later. And that's another thing I had to learn, because at that point, where I would be like, okay, let's talk about it, but she would not be ready to speak about it. And I had to give her space. I think oftentimes when we think of our children, we think of them in terms of ownership, and I don't mean that in the worst way. I mean, like, we birthed them, we had them, or whether we birthed them or adopted them, whatever the scenario is, they're ours, right? They're ours. In fact, that's how we describe them. They're ours. But the reality is they're human beings. They're children by our classification of their age, but we're raising tiny human beings who will one
Yes.
day be big human beings. And we need to be mindful and model for them what ownership and responsibility and accountability for their own bodies and responses and things like that. And so looking at her, a mirror, like you said, mirror, like, whoo, wow, that is me. That
Yes.
well, that's me, right? And I'm like, if how can I be the mother I wish I had?
Yes.
And that's where I started to like redesign or redefine what motherhood looks like for me in this phase.
Yeah, that's good. And it brought to mind first the big emotions, right?
Mm-hmm.
We all have them. I remember having them. I am an emotional person, right? And I was always question God, like, why did you make me this way? Because everything it seems to fight against me because I am emotional. He's like, no, you got to learn how to control that. But with my daughter, what I'm learning to do, because it's we are still in process.
Right.
It is and it's a daily journey. When they say pick up your cross, yes, that it's a daily thing. And so with her, I feel like I've always said, because I was silenced as a child, I lost
Mm-hmm.
my voice.
Mm-hmm.
And really hard for me is raising my children in general, not just my daughter, because my boys too,
Yep.
is giving them the voice, but it being respectful and not using the term "I'm the adult, you're a child." I don't say that to my children.
Yeah.
Um, because like you said, they are human beings. God gifted them to us because he trusted us and what we had and what he could do through us to be
Right.
able to steward them. But that doesn't mean that they lack emotions and feelings and all these things that we do. They probably get it more because you taking two parents,
Mm.
bringing them together and creating this one being. And if mama's emotional, daddy's got this, it's like boom, there you go. So what I've learned to do, and I'm working on, I just say working on because it's in process or whatever, but I try my best with my children, especially her, to give her the opportunity to voice herself, get mad, get angry,
Yep.
but set boundaries. You know what you can and can't say.
Yeah.
Another example, we're at softball practice just this Wednesday. And we were talking about just our physical bodies. And one thing I like to teach my daughter, love your body the way it is. If you want to
Yeah.
work out, because she's always working out, that's because I don't want to be taking pills like grandma and Nana. I'm
Right.
so, because I'm not responsible. I
Mm-hmm.
can barely take vitamins. Matter of fact, and I'm thinking about it now, I forgot to take them this morning when I got up. But when I said, I want you to have a voice. And so we are at practice, and she said something a little off the walls, and I didn't hear it, but her friend did. She said, if I said that to my mom, I'd be laid out on the floor. And I said, what'd she say? She's like, I'm not repeating that because I don't want her to get in trouble. So her friend had enough wisdom to know, like, I'm not about to get you in trouble. But the point is, after her friend walked off, I said, hey, what did you say? She told me, I said, do you ever consider that when these things come out of your mouth, how that would make the other person feel? Not just me. And then I flipped it around. I said, if I were to say that to you, how would it make you feel? Remember, I'm a thought leader. I
Yeah.
said, yeah, I walked off. I dropped the mic and walked off. Later on that evening, she said, Mom, I thought about what you said. Good, right? And she's like, I thought about what you said and I got an apology versus what I experienced is, don't talk to me like that. You're a child. I'm the parent. You done lost your mind, blah, 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 right? You're not going to get any results from that. That
No.
child is going to shut down. They're going to lose their voice. And so I've always wanted to specifically empower my daughter to have a voice because when she enters into rooms where people feel like she doesn't belong, I want that voice to come out. When she is doing things in the world focused on her purpose, I want that voice to come out. And so I've always allowed the freedom and the space for my children to have that because you will get lost in this world. I just
Mm-hmm.
found my voice a year ago, a year and a half ago, and it has been the most empowering thing that has happened. Yes, you look at me like that, but yes, when I went through that whole identity crisis, that's a book coming. But
Right.
yeah,
Right.
it felt like I was going through an identity crisis. And we'll talk about this too because I do want to talk about how identity plays a big part in how we raise our children and how we have to reparent ourselves, and that's where my journey started. So
Yes, I love that. So we're going to pivot to that. I just want to bring up there was a recent research article I read about black women silencing themselves. And ultimately we silence ourselves in certain situations because historically we have learned that when we speak up, there are consequences to us speaking up. So we learn to silence out of fear and out of a survival mechanism. So, we are truly made up of learned behavior, even
mhm.
down to how we do not respond in situations in which we probably should respond. So I do want to dive into like the identity crisis, the reparenting, re-evolving, because similar to you, the last 2 years are, well, at this point 3 years, it's definitely the pandemic really was like a catalyst for me to go, is this really working for me? This ain't working. And but guess what? I have the beauty of redefining what this needs to look like. So I would love to hear your take and your experience.
So I love how you said the beauty. So for me, it has didn't start out feeling like it was beautiful, let me tell you, but
Right?
it's been a beautiful journey. And I didn't know what I was doing when I asked God. I said, Lord, I don't know who I am. I've lived in the shadow, and someone challenged me. They said, "Who are you?" When I got this new job as a professor, they're like, "When you show up as your authentic self, it's amazing. But when you
Mm,
do this code switch, I don't know who I'm dealing with." And so, right, it's like I don't know who I'm gonna get, and I'm like, "Is that how I'm showing up in the world?" So what I did is I asked God. I said, "God, who am I? I want to know my identity in you, not the world, because I've lived that life." And I think what it stemmed from, and I'll share this
mm-hmm.
another transparent moment. And I don't think I've ever shared this with anybody else other than my spiritual mom and my
Okay.
husband. I think I may have shared it a little bit with you, but I used to teach secondary education, and they go through this whole process of teacher of the year. Now, when you get there, that's all you hear about. So you're like, teacher of the year is like the big thing.
Right.
Again, as a black woman chasing accolades because I thought that my identity was tied into what I did, right? So I remember before I got this job, I don't hope I'm not telling too much, but before became a professor at the college that I'm at right now, literally went through the interview process because I was like, Lord, I love high school, but it's a new season, it's a new day. Like we need to do something different.
Mm-hmm.
And so opportunity presented itself through a friend that we went to high school with, and she was working at the college. Long story short, interviewed, and it was complete silence. So I was like, okay, Lord, no worries, thy will be done. Monday. No, it was a Tuesday. And mind you, there was a 2 month silence, the waiting, where I didn't hear anything from the college. They had gone on a hiring freeze. I didn't
What?
know. And luckily, I had a friend who worked at another college, the same college, but a different campus, who gave me the scoop because I was like, what's going on? But again, I was like, Lord, if this is not for me, thy will be done. Tuesday got announced teacher of the year. Friday, I got a call and they said, you got the position. So I took it. Any wise person would, right? The same people that were cheering for me, congratulations, you got teacher of the year, were the same people who were giving me the side eye and how dare you leave after this and we voted for you. It was one of those things where like Jesus, right? Let's just comparison,
Yeah.
was saying hallelujah, Hosanna, praise his name. And then next thing you know, crucify him. He's on the cross. And that's how I felt. But God taught me in that He said, your identity is not in the world. You are in the world, but you are not
Not
of the world.
of the world.
So let's fast forward. Got there, been working for about a year and a half. February 3rd, I prayed again. Stuff always happened on Monday and Tuesday. Prayed, I remember at the beginning of that week. I said, God, I want to know who I am in you. I'm like desperate to know who I am in you because I've been doing the world stuff and I've been showing up wrong. I've been hurting a lot of people
Mm.
and even hurting myself. And my kids, I don't want that to transfer to them. And so February 3rd, my identity got stolen because the enemy said, no, you're not going to know who you are. He's like, oh, you want to know who you are for real? I'm about to steal your identity. So that's where the book Identity Theft is coming from. But literally, and when I tell y'all this was supernatural, the way that it happened, I was like, it had to be a supernatural, a spiritual, excuse me, experience because of how it happened. There was no evidence. No, it was just weird, y'all. I don't
Mm.
know how to explain it. But my whole point is after that, that sent me on this downward spiral into learning who my identity was in Christ. And the one thing that I had to do was learn God's character, who He was, because we are made in His image. And I
Right.
was measuring everything through either idols or things outside of myself or things that I was taught as a child. Like, you have to go, break that glass ceiling, and this is who you are. Your education, that's what you are, and that wasn't it. Um, and it was a very lonely journey.
Mm.
I felt like Elijah. I went into the cave and I was depressed, being fed by ravens and all this other kind of stuff. Like, it was a season where it was just me and God. But what I learned from that, and that's when I learned that a lot of my experiences, my reactions to things stemmed from the way that I was raised.
Mm.
Now, let's fast forward.
Okay.
I'm learning to grow more in my identity when things happen to me or experiences happen, specifically to the way I speak to it. So, one day, someone came to my office and they're like, we need to brainstorm. First of all, I don't want a storm going on in my brain. So, I brain map. I do brain mapping. We map it out, right? We on a journey. Then
Yes.
they said, and this word triggers that has been so big since the pandemic has started. That word does something to my spirit, and so instead of saying triggers, I'm like, no, that has ignited or that set off my spiritual radar. And
Mm.
what those things do is it keeps you in a positive mindset, positive focus, but it also shifts you into being able to keep your focus on God, always running back and leaning back into Him and the Word. Whereas if I go off on a tangent, I'd be all in my emotions, a whole hot mess. But when I say no, that's telling me something that needs to either be healed or needs to be tended to or needs to be nurtured. Um, and it's not anything that anybody else can do. That's inner work. And
Mm.
so that also came along with the identity part was also setting boundaries. I didn't know what boundaries were. And when I tell you, as a child, in multiple ways, boundaries were crossed and didn't even realize it.
Didn't
It
realize it.
was
Mm-hmm.
because they didn't know. They didn't have boundaries. And so I met a friend at the church we were attending. That was her thing. She had gone through a whole journey of boundary work and just get through that whole process. And I learned so much from her. As a matter of fact, I know we talk about books. There's a book, what is it, Boundaries by John Townsend,
Mm.
I've read, and they have it for young people. So I bought one. After yesterday, what happened yesterday with my daughter, I got her one. It's Boundaries for teen, or teen. It's either youth or teens, but either way, she's gonna read it. But um,
Like, look, she gonna read. She's gonna read. We gonna do a
so
book club. We gonna read it. As a
together,
family.
but yeah. But my whole point is, my journey, and it's been amazing. Like, learning who I am, the things that I like, because people would say all the stuff and all the things externally, but I never believed it. Once I
Yeah.
began to know who I was,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, you know what sis was saying, that's true. Even you'll say stuff, because a few months ago, I was like, I don't know. I'm like, I don't want to do this. You're like, no, sis, this is you. This is for you. Go for it.
Yep.
So when you have people speaking to your identity versus the opposite, as a child, unfortunately, well, no, I say fortunately because God had a plan in it. Um, I had a step parent who did not speak well into my identity.
Mm.
And that echoed I think about 300 echoed in eternity, but that echoed in my mind for years. I watch a lot of
Right.
movies. But it echoed in my mind for years, being called stupid, being
Mm.
called, unintelligent, and just really the people you think that are supposed to love and nurture and care for you are the ones that
Yeah.
hurt you most when it comes to your identity. And I will say this though, although my mom, she never talked to me like that because she told me her mom talked to her that way, so she would
Mhm.
not do that. My mom never did that, but she also never told me she loved me a lot. She never hugged me a lot. And I didn't realize that until I had kids, because I would kind of reject my kids. And I'm like, where's that coming from? And it was because I got that rejection, but she didn't know any better. And
Right.
so I remember distinctly when we were at Lancaster High School, I was going through it. I was going through it.
Mm.
There were some really mean girls. And I remember my mom was getting ready to drop me off at school, and I will never forget this. I will carry this to heaven when I get there. I won't say grave because we don't get stuck there, but but and I hope I make it into heaven. But my mom, right when I got ready to get out the car, her green little Honda Civic, she said, "Patrice, I want you to know I love you and you're beautiful." That wrecked me. That wrecked me, Tavier. My mom never said that. But what as an adult, when I reflect back on that, I think about what that meant for her because she
Yeah.
never she was called ugly. She was called just so, when I tell you this, I
Yeah.
don't even the stuff that was said to her that she told me her mom would say, my grandma. But yeah, so for her, I felt like that was a moment of healing because she was able to give her daughter something that she didn't get. And so I've seen with my mom even those things. I have to speak now when we go into the reparenting.
Yep.
I'm the one speaking into her identity. I'm the
Mhm.
one praying for her. I'm the one saying, "Mom, you may want to rethink that decision, or
Mhm.
what do?" It's like one of them things. Like,
Yes.
what if this was you on, the shoe was on the other foot? What would you feel like? What would you want to happen? And so even yesterday we had a conversation. I was like, "Mom, you just want to think about your decision because you've been blessed, and God doesn't give us things for us. He
Mhm.
blesses us so we can bless others,
That's
whether it's
right.
a house, whether it's a car. Girl, I use my car. It's blessed. My tires got new tires because we've been rolling and taking kids here, there, and everywhere. It's like a whole Dr. Seuss story. But I, I'm just like, whatever God gives me, I want to use that for His glory. And
Right.
I learned the hard way because my mom was like, "No, I'm not using my house. Can't have everybody in your house, blah blah blah," which you can't. But if I
Right.
know my house is prayed over and anointed and covered by the blood of Jesus, because I put in work with that, yes, come into my house so you can get some of this good healthy food and spiritual tuning that you,
Mhm.
or just come. And my house, people, when they do come here, they say it's so peaceful. People come here, they call me like I'm coming over to just sleep. And that's why I said, Mom, God gives us this not for us,
Yeah.
but to give Him glory and to help His build His kingdom and His people and help them heal. And so the biggest part, and the last thing, and then we can pivot, but the healing part.
Mhm.
Um, and when I talk about Elijah in the cave, there was a period of darkness because it's like everything I thought I knew was wrong, or everything that I thought I knew was a lie, or everything that
Mhm.
I thought I knew that I was wrong about was truth. Having
Mhm.
to navigate through all that at 41, 42 years old. I don't even know how to, no, 40 and 41 because I'm 42 now. Um, Girl, after 40, you just be like, I'm here.
I'm here, right? Like, what year is this? Oh yeah,
That's
yeah, yeah.
glorious.
Mhm.
Which I will say, 40, sis, 40 looks good nowadays. I'm just
Right.
say that well preserved. But my whole point is, it was very dark, and my husband, through my journey, he was also able to heal. And we are both reparenting ourselves. We are both having to look at, so he's more like the financial guy
Mhm.
and on money and saving and teaching generations like financial empowerment. That is like his thing. And I remember from that, we would go back to his former neighborhood and we were like, why are there always check cashing stations or liquor stores, or you don't see
Why?
that in neighborhood, and like I can't even think of, I can't, like I really can't. And so I'm like,
Right.
they don't set us up for success in these neighborhoods. So we're out. We've been out for a while, right? Started from the
Mm-hmm.
bottom here,
Now
and
we
we still
here.
like we just here, right? But I joked with him about that last night. But the mindset
Yeah.
carried over. And so you have all this money in the bank, but you still are operating out of impoverished mindset. That's the
Mm.
parenting. God has given you a clean slate. You're a parent now, so you can do things over. But are you going to do things the same way that you were taught? Are you
Right.
wise enough to know how to do something different? Or are you going to carry those same things on? So are
Mm.
you going to use that same pot? Or are you going to take what you have and not just use the new thing? Like you said, I'm not just going to give my kids all this stuff, but
Right.
I'm going to teach you. Because when I teach you, I empower you to not only do better, but I empower you to also teach others as well, like the next generation and the next. And so
Mm.
there is so many levels to this, but like I said, the most intense part of the journey was the healing, is because I'm still healing,
Yeah.
through therapy, and had to, and I will say this too for the people who are listening. um be mindful of who you have speaking into your life and pouring into you, especially when you're on a healing journey, because when
Yes.
you're healing, you're vulnerable, and there
Yes.
are gateways, there are things, there are pathways to your spirit and your soul and your heart that are vulnerable, they're tender, and they're open. And I had a very loving, kind Christian, um or believer, therapist who spoke to my identity. She
Mm.
was the one, I think, a part of the one after the enemy stole it. She was the one who helped me reclaim that and started me on that journey. And so, and she would speak to my identity. She said, get that Bible, and we're gonna read Romans. I think it's Romans
Wow.
8. I don't remember specifically. I have it highlighted. But she made me read it to her out loud and repeatedly, to the point where I was crying and boohooing and mad because certain stuff in the scripture I didn't believe. And I'm like, this is a lie that's been told to me
Oh.
in life, but this is what God really said about me. And
Mm-hmm.
so now I've learned to take the word and use that to affirm, and to affirm my
Amen.
children, and speak life into my children. And try my best to, like, I realize I don't tell my kids I love them all the time. My daughter, my son, he told us, we did the love languages,
Mm-hmm.
and physical is not his thing. And I'm like, but I'm a hugger. So my child, again, let's, well, that will bring us into rejection.
Yeah.
I love hugs. My child does not like to be touched. He's like, no, like, I'm good. Just high five, you being in my presence, sitting. We might be shoulder to shoulder, but don't hug me. That's a teenage thing, but because my oldest was like that, and then now it's like I can keep him away. It's like, what do you want? But I've learned through that process
Mm-hmm.
that when you know who you are, you
Are.
show up in the world different. And I think you told me that. I don't know, that I feel like that little tingling I get, the Tavier tingle. That's I think I remember you sharing that with me. Like, when you know who you are, you show up in the world different. And
Yeah.
so I have been, the last thing I'll say is, because I read a lot, I'm always shooting books like, ooh, have you read this or whatever? And what helped me on my journey was Joyce Meyer's book, Battlefield of the Mind. I actually have the book and the Bible.
Girl, that's my
Because
book.
let me tell you something, ladies specifically who are listening to this. The enemy, because we are well springs, we are multipliers. God gives, when the seed is planted in us, anything that God gives us, we multiply. As you know, it usually starts in the mind. Well, it
Right.
starts in the heart. Then we go in the mind, we start processing. A woman's most powerful gift is her mind, because then when translated through the heart, she gives birth to so many things. She's fruitful and she multiplies. Think about I remember, I forgot the gentleman's name. He's really popular, so forgive me. But I remember hearing him say this on Instagram, and he said, you give a woman a house, she'll make it a home. You give woman seed, she'll give you children, right? You give a woman whatever it is, and so it's like we take things and we multiply them. Well, what's the enemy's prime goal? Kill, steal, destroy. What is he going to try and destroy first in a woman? Her mind. He's going
Yes.
to make her think that she's crazy, that she can't do it, she's incapable, that everything that happened to her as a child was her fault, or even if it wasn't her fault, that she can't be redeemed or restored or set free and delivered from that. And so the biggest thing on my healing journey is has been the mind,
Yeah.
transforming the mind. And so I've read a lot of books in reference to the mind, um, in connection with identity,
Yeah.
um, and just being able to empower myself. And so there's a difference in worldly validation and affirmation. So I want to be clear on that. When you are validated and affirmed through the word of God and who you know, that inner knowing, you just show up different. And I will say, in this new role that I'm in my job, um, and just being around women who know who they are, like, has empowered me to show up more like myself. So hence Tavier, we've had these
Yep.
conversations through voice messaging
Yep.
and
Podcasting.
there you go. There you go. But just with that is I show up different, and they're like, who is this? And sometimes people don't like that person because they like the passive aggressive. They like
Yeah.
they just want you to be seen and not heard, pretty face, but don't say nothing. Don't give your,
Right.
or great mind, but we don't want to hear about it, or we'll hear about it, but then be like, oh, that's not, who is he? What does he say? And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. He just said the same thing I said, but because I'm a woman, it's different. And so, um, it's just about who we show up as and how we embrace the healing journey. Because you can go, God can set you on that journey, and you just kicking and fighting and screaming the whole time, and it's gonna delay or belabor the process. Versus when you embrace it and you accept it as being beautiful,
That's right.
I learned to get through the process. I won't say quicker, because a healing journeys are of their own. They're of their own time for each person. But how you get through it and how you see it and your mindset and how you, um, handle it and manage it, the experience is completely different when you accept it. And so, yeah, I know that was a lot, but
It
was just
was
like,
a lot, but
no,
it
I
was
story.
so well needed. It
I was
was
like,
so well
story.
needed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, thank you, Patrice, so much. You put in a whole word and a whole sermon in this podcast. So I know those who are watching it on YouTube will be blessed by it. Those who are listening on traditional platforms will be blessed by it. So I just want to thank you for your time, what you've sown into us, and I definitely will be having you back on the podcast because there's more for us to talk about. So,
Yeah.
sis, I love you tremendously and thank you for being transparent and vulnerable with us. I know this is going to bless so many people that are going to listen and see this. So, I just want to make sure we close this out with this reminder: you are more than enough. You are wonderfully made. There are no flaws that cannot be healed, loved on, fixed, addressed. Just know that. And until the next episode, remember, we love you here at the Black Girls Guide to the Pivot. Until the next back time, the next back channel, come back now. You hear?
Bye.